Next News, breaking news.
15 million people are dead, and Joe Biden's people still rushed Anthony Fauci a 10-year, non-specific preemptive pardon hours before President Trump took office. That's the detail. Not 5 years ago, not in the fog of 2020, hours before Trump walked in, Biden's machine tried to slam the vault shut on the man that Rand Paul says funded dangerous gain-of-function research in Wuhan and lied to Congress about it. But the vault door just blew open. Rand Paul re-referred Fauci to the DOJ, subpoenaed him after Fauci backed out of voluntary testimony, and now Fauci will testify July 29th at 10 a.m. Eastern. And the documents Biden buried? Trump's team turned them over. The story matters because Anthony Fauci did not just bark bad advice on cable TV. Anthony Fauci became the smirking face of a regime that shut your church, crushed your business, masked your child, censored your questions, and then hid the paper trail. Rand Paul put it bluntly. The evidence is clear. He says Fauci funded dangerous gain-of-function research, knew the likely origin of COVID as early as January 2020, and spent years lying to Congress and the American people. Then Paul dropped the number that should haunt every hearing room in Washington. 15 million people are dead. Under the former Biden administration, Paul says investigators got stonewalled and blocked from documents. Under the Trump administration, Secretary Kennedy and Trump's team turned over virtually everything. That contrast is the whole scandal in one shot. Biden's apparatus protected Fauci. Trump's administration ripped the files loose. If Fauci skates under a blanket pardon, every swamp operator learns the same lesson. Bankroll chaos, torch records, lie under oath, and retire rich. You see, hours before President Trump took office, Biden's machine shoved through a sweeping Fauci pardon. And that same bureaucratic rot hit seniors through the Medicare confusion industrial complex. See, chapter cuts through it. They make Medicare simple by design. One call, one advisor, and it's free, under 20 minutes. They look at your doctors, they look at your prescriptions, they look at your whole situation and tell you the truth. No propaganda, just facts. Chapter works for you, not big insurance. They exist to break the fog that keeps seniors stuck in bad plans. If you're already on the right plan, they will say so. If not, they'll help you switch. Last year, people who found new plans with Chapter saved an average of $1,100. So call that number on the screen, 910-728-4109. Don't let another rigged system trap your family in the dark. Put Fauci under oath next. And here's the part that should make Anthony Fauci sweat right now. Rand Paul doesn't just want Fauci on camera. He wants Fauci under oath about the pardon itself. Paul flat out said he finds it hard to believe that Fauci was not in communication with Biden's staff about the terms of that unprecedented Autopen pardon. That changes the temperature completely. This is no longer just did Fauci lie in 2020. This becomes who drafted the shield, who signed it, who knew what, and why did Fauci suddenly run from voluntary testimony before that subpoena landed? Rand Paul continuing his barrage against Anthony Fauci ahead of the upcoming testimony. He says, I've re-referred Fauci to the DOJ for prosecution. The evidence is clear.
Well, the investigation of COVID origins has been going on for several years. The Biden administration stymied us and wouldn't give us any of the documents. The Trump administration has been very cooperative, particularly Secretary Kennedy. They've turned over virtually everything. And what we now know beyond a reasonable doubt is that Anthony Fauci did indeed fund gain-of-function research. We have the evidence that the experiments were gaining in function. The viruses were becoming more lethal, more attachable to human cells, and more infectious. We do know that this was going on, that was funded by the NIH, specifically under the tutelage of Anthony Fauci. We know all of that, but we know even more now. We know that the initial estimate by the scientists at the CIA was that this came from the lab. They agreed with our supposition. But Anthony Fauci was able to coerce, cajole, persuade, and dangle money to get people in the intelligence community to change their vote. So a scientific commission within the CIA voted 6-1 to say it came from the lab. He somehow was able to get that change. We have evidence of that happening. The virologists that he handpicked that were big recipients of federal dollars, all of them initially were saying it looks like it was manipulated. The virus looks manipulated. He was able to convince them otherwise. We now have evidence that in January of 2020, that he was already acknowledging that the virus did not come from the wet market, that the wet market was a spreader event, but wasn't an initial event because we had lineages of people way before the wet market that were getting sick. Everyone acknowledged that, but for years he's been telling us it came from animals at the wet market. This was all misdirection. This was a conspiracy. This was a cover-up, and he has not really gotten his just desserts on this, and we want to make sure that the American public and that history records that he was involved with funding this dangerous research that led to a pandemic that killed 15 million people. There needs to be repercussions.
15 million people. So Rand Paul laying out the court case. Fauci funded the research, knew early, helped bury the truth. Next, Senator Ashley Moody zeroes in on the lockdown dogma itself, from masks to the 6-foot rule. Moody exposes Fauci for all of his lies. The pandemic, the tests, the masks, the social distancing, the vaccine science, the news, all of it.
And then you had Dr. Fauci, who came out and contradicted himself constantly. At one point, he even admitted later, he told people shouldn't be walking around with masks on. And later he said that was because we were trying to control the supply for healthcare professionals. It wasn't based on any science. But then later he told everyone to wear masks repeatedly. The 6-foot rule seemed to have been just crafted out of thin air with no basis in science whatsoever. In fact, he said that rule sort of just appeared when he testified. And that guidance on the shutdown of schools and small businesses was arbitrary and not based on any science. So I just want to make sure the American people hear that. You had a government who's supposed to be limited and stay out of people's lives, coming in and offering guidance. Many times it was done under mandates to close businesses, people's livelihoods, to keep children from being educated, to keep people from expressing their faith and gathering to show freedom of religion and their faith and expression. I mean, unbelievable what happened during the COVID years.
We'll never forget. The point is simple. The rules that wrecked businesses, schools, and churches weren't grounded in real science. Now back to Paul, who's moving from accusations to action. The investigations, he writes, into the origins of COVID have been ongoing. The Biden administration stonewalled us at every turn, but the Trump administration has been cooperative and turned over virtually everything. We've seen the documents. We've built the timeline. Fauci backed out of voluntary testimony, so we issued a subpoena. He'll testify on July 29th. Accountability is coming. So after years of stonewalling, Paul says that Trump's team finally turned over the records and timelines locked in. Next, he turns to the 10-year pardon itself, why it says it may not hold up without a fight. The mask is off. Fauci's shady preemptive pardon is a joke, too vague, too weak, and is about to crumble in court.
Anthony Fauci is now 85. Is there any point trying to prosecute him?
I referred him twice to the DOJ under Biden for criminal prosecution. They never acted on it. I've referred him twice to the Trump DOJ without action on it. They may say because of his pardon they can't prosecute him. I think that's an open question. I think the courts, in all likelihood, probably will side with the pardon, but there are some questions. Can you pardon somebody for a non-specific crime? Is it too vague to say, I'm going to prosecute you for, not prosecute you and pardon you for anything you did in the last 10 years? I think there's a possibility the court says that's vague and not specific, and you can't give people some kind of pardon for everything and over such a long period of time. I think there's a chance we'd win that. I think it ought to be fought. We have two clear-cut cases against him, lying to Congress, which is a felony, but also destroying public records. We now have emails that he distributed to Francis Collins and others saying, hey, read this and then destroy it. That is against the law. You're not allowed to do that in the executive branch. It's clear. His only argument is, it wasn't about government, and it clearly was, and I think a jury would decide. So I still would prosecute him. I plan on bringing him in. We've been negotiating a voluntary testimony for almost a year now as he continues the slow drip of giving us records. But I suspect in the near future, you're going to be hearing about us bringing him back in here, probably not voluntarily.
So Paul's not back enough just because Biden tried to wrap Fauci in a blanket pardon. That leads directly to Nancy Mace asking in plain English, if Fauci's innocent, why didn't he need one at all? She posted the meme, if Fauci was innocent, why did he need a preemptive pardon? Yeah, great question. So she cuts to the heart of it. Innocent people don't need preemptive protection. Catherine Herridge reports that Fauci's pardon may not be bulletproof after all. Fauci pardon, not bulletproof. There are at least two viable unconventional legal strategies. Plus, will aggravating factors play a role in John Bolton's sentencing? So even with the White House trying to shut the door, legal cracks may still be there. Up next, Rand Paul praises the exact point with Maria Bartiromo, raises the Autopen question hanging over Biden's last-minute pardon.
Outrageous. What about this pardon? What can be done now? Joe Biden gave him a preemptive pardon literally hours before President Trump took office. Do you believe that can be challenged? Is it legitimate? Was it done by an Autopen?
You know, lawyers and people from the Attorney General's office will have to determine. I think it's extraordinary. It's a pardon that goes over 10 years and doesn't have specific crimes. The only other pardon like this in the history of the United States would be what Hunter Biden received. And there's been a lot of questions about that. So a 10-year pardon on non-specific crimes, I wonder whether or not that is the intention the Constitution had when they gave the pardon power. But it has to be challenged. Me saying it's not enough. You would have to actually go to court and challenge the validity of it. There also is some question, did President Biden, was he aware of who Anthony Fauci was? Did he specifically understand the details of the case and grant Anthony Fauci a pardon? Or did a low-level assistant with an Autopen do this without consultation with the president? I don't know all the facts on that, but I think it's worth coming out. He should be asked about the pardon. If he comes, if he obeys the law and the subpoena, if he comes to my committee, we will ask him about the pardon.
Let's go. Let's go. So Paul says a 10-year pardon for non-specific crimes has to be challenged, especially with questions about who actually approved it. Next, Ron Johnson points to another route entirely, the states. A presidential pardon only blocks federal charges. Senator Ron Johnson says if they're outraged enough, they could possibly bring him up on state charges.
So a state, if they're outraged enough, could possibly bring him up.
Does Fauci's pardon mean that he just gets away with it? He just walks away scot-free?
Well, Fauci's pardon is for federal charges only. So a state, if they're outraged enough, could possibly bring him up. So a state, if they're outraged enough, could possibly bring him up.
Seeing none, the question before the body is adopting the resolution entitled Resolution in Robust Support. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I thought I was wrong. I was mistaken. A resolution in robust support of the South Dakota Attorney General's pursuit of justice and accountability for COVID-19 pandemic response malfeasance and fraud, pursuant to the February 2025 State Attorneys General Coalition Letter.
So a state, if they're outraged enough, could possibly bring him up.
All those in favor of adopting the resolution, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Motion passes.
So South Dakota got outraged enough. That's what you saw there. On June 26th, the South Dakota Republican Party Convention adopted Resolution 690, urging the Attorney General and the Government Operations and Audit Committee to pursue COVID-19 accountability under state law beyond the Fauci pardon. South Dakota AG Marty Jackley already signed the February 25th coalition letter of 17 state AGs pledging the same. The states are the path around the pardon. South Dakota is taking it up. So if Washington protects its own, red states may have to do the job themselves. Up next, Rand Paul says Fauci didn't just get a sweetheart pardon. He needs to answer how it happened and whether he perjured himself.
Big news this week. On Monday, I sent a subpoena to Dr. Anthony Fauci. We've subpoenaed him to come testify before the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. This subpoena comes after months of back and forth discussions with Fauci's attorneys regarding our efforts to have him come voluntarily to testify. Unfortunately, he promised he would do so, and then he reneged at the last moment. So the subpoena is now necessary to try to get him to testify. This is about the origins, and it's about the cover-up and his involvement in covering up what the origins were and his funding of the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope to ask him about the circumstances surrounding his unprecedented Autopen pardon. One might have to look back even to Richard Nixon's preemptive pardon to find such a generous protection from prosecution. I find it hard to believe that Dr. Fauci was not in communication with the Biden administration staff regarding the terms of his pardon. I also plan to make the case that Dr. Fauci perjured himself during his 2024 testimony to Congress. During his testimony, Dr. Fauci denied communications with intelligence officials regarding the origin of the COVID-19 virus. My investigation, along with documents from former Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, directly contradicts the statements that Anthony Fauci made to Congress.
So the pressure tightens. Fauci ducked voluntary testimony, now facing questions about both perjury and unprecedented pardon. Now Congressman Greg Murphy delivers a blunt verdict. Pardon or no pardon, Fauci lies to Congress and the world. His arrogance and hubris brought a scourge to humanity and needs to answer for this. Catherine Herridge looks at one more possible legal squeeze, including conspiracy charges. Fauci's legal squeeze: in theory, Fauci could be prosecuted under the conspiracy statute 18 U.S.C. 371, especially if new charges emerge. It feels like a long shot with President Biden's preemptive pardon, but then who could have anticipated the radical transparency of Gabbard's final days in office? So the legal case may not be dead, especially if fresh documents keep surfacing. Next, the focus shifts to the red states and the question a lot of grassroots conservatives are asking: who actually is going to make a move? His alleged federal pardon doesn't impede red states from going after Fauci, yet no red state has filed charges. I'm hoping the DeSantis administration makes a move. So the frustration is building. If states can act, why hasn't one pulled the trigger? Next comes another pressure point for Fauci. Once he's back under oath, the fifth may not save him. One good thing is that Congress can bring Fauci back on for sworn testimony under penalty of perjury. He won't be able to claim the Fifth Amendment, giving the pre-existing pardon. Truth or imprisonment, it would actually be ideal for science. So if Fauci can't hide behind silence, the next hearing becomes a direct choice between truth and another crime. Up next, the grassroots say exactly what they want that testimony to look like. Roast him for 72 hours on the stand. He can't take the fifth thanks to Biden's pardon. If he lies, that's a crime. If he doesn't show up, jail him. So the base wants Fauci on the stand for hours because every answer now carries legal risk. Rand Paul puts the clock on it with a blunt message: accountability is coming. Anthony Fauci funded dangerous gain-of-function research in Wuhan, lied to Congress, and helped orchestrate the biggest medical cover-up in modern history. It is time for accountability. And he posted this: accountability is coming for Fauci. July 29th, 10 a.m. Eastern. So the ugliest detail in the whole pile is still the cleanest one. Biden's team handed Anthony Fauci a 10-year pardon for non-specific crimes hours before Donald Trump took office after years of stonewalling investigators, and only then did the Trump administration turn over virtually everything. That sequence convicts the cover-up mentality by itself. Innocent men do not need a decade-long fog bank pardon. Honest governments do not hide records until power changes hands. Anthony Fauci sold masks he admitted were not based on science, a 6-foot rule that just appeared, shutdowns that gutted American life, and then wrapped himself in media sainthood while Rand Paul built the timeline. Now the date sits there like a hammer on the table. July 29th, 10 a.m. Eastern. Accountability is coming. So here's the demand. The Attorney General needs to test that pardon in court. Rand Paul needs to put Anthony Fauci in the chair on July 29th and keep him there until every dodge collapses. And if federal prosecutors drag their feet, red states need to move because Ron Johnson is right. Biden's pardon only blocks federal charges. South Dakota already flashed the path with Resolution 690. Follow it. Force the issue. Make Fauci answer for Wuhan funding, the lies to Congress, the destroyed records, the fake science decrees, and the bureaucratic arrogance that mauled this country. President Trump and Secretary Kennedy did their part by turning over the documents that Biden's people buried. Now the rest of the system has to decide whether law still means anything when the culprit wears a lab coat. Drop your take below and send this to people who got smeared for doubting Fauci. And mark the clock, because July 29th, 10 a.m. Eastern, accountability is coming. I want to make sure that you get the news when it matters most. That's why I set up this telephone number just for you. Thousands and thousands of patriots have already texted the words raw feed to 844-840-4963. I want you to be the next one, so you don't miss the notifications that YouTube never sends, because I'll send them direct to you. And celebrate America 250 with the Next News Network by going to the merch shelf below this video or shop.nextnewsnetwork.com.
The system controls information. Information control is power. They don't want you to see this. The truth only survives together. They don't want this shared. Share this now. You know out.